Wine that day in Syria carried more than dust, it carried fear. The streets were quiet, the sky looked angry, and even the birds refused to sing. It was as if heaven itself was watching, waiting. Somewhere in the city of Maaloula, a place known for its ancient Christian history, a cruel man stood tall among soldiers. His name was General Karim. He was a man everyone feared, even his own men trembled when he spoke. His voice was cold, like steel scraping on stone. He wore black boots that crushed the earth as he walked. People whispered that his heart had turned to stone long ago. That morning, he received orders from his superiors: find the Christians who refuse to deny Jesus and make an example of them. But Karim went further than his orders. He shouted before his army, "We will crucify every one of them who refuses to bow." The soldiers looked uneasy. Even the most wicked among them hesitated. Crucifixion was an ancient punishment, slow, painful, and cruel. It had not been done for centuries. Yet Karim wanted it that way. He wanted to bring back terror. He wanted to show power. So they began searching. Door by door, home by home. They dragged out men and women, some crying, some singing softly, "Jesus, we trust you." Among them was a group of believers, 7 in total, who refused to deny their faith. Their eyes were full of tears, but their hearts were strong. They were farmers, mothers, children, ordinary people with extraordinary courage. When Karim saw them, he laughed. "You still believe this Jesus can save you?" he mocked. One of the men, old and weak, looked up at him. "Yes," he said calmly. "He already has." Karim grew angry. "Then let him save you from the cross," he shouted. He ordered his men to prepare the crosses by the town's edge. The soldiers obeyed. The sun was burning hot as they lifted the wooden beams upright. Villagers were forced to watch. Children hid behind walls, crying. As the Christians were tied and lifted up, the sky began to change. The light dimmed, the air became heavy. A strange stillness fell over the land. Even the soldiers grew silent. Karim smirked, thinking the fear in the air was his doing. He raised his hand and said, "Now everyone will see, there is no power above me." But at that very moment, a deep sound echoed, a rumble from the earth itself. The ground began to shake under their feet. The crosses trembled, the wind howled, the fire from the torches began to dance wildly, growing taller, brighter, and hotter. Karim shouted at his men, "Hold the crosses. Don't let them fall." But the fire seemed alive, as if it had a mind of its own. It jumped from torch to torch, then toward Karim himself. His soldiers screamed, dropping their weapons, fleeing in terror. The wind grew like a storm, swirling dust and flame together. And then, something unimaginable happened. The fire turned, curling upward like a giant hand, and wrapped itself around Karim. He screamed as the fire did not burn the others, only him. His armor melted, his voice broke into cries that echoed through the valley. And in that fire, witnesses swore they heard something, not words from men, but a voice, powerful and clear, saying, "You lifted your hand against my people. Now my hand is lifted against you." The soldiers ran. The people fell to their knees. And the 7 Christians, still hanging on their crosses, began to sing softly, their voices rising above the flames, full of peace. That night, the city could not sleep. The ground where Karim stood was blackened, but the crosses still stood, untouched by the fire. The news spread quickly. The man who ordered God's people to die was burned by a fire that came from the sky itself. But this was only the beginning. The world had seen the fire, but not yet the truth behind it. The next morning, Syria woke to whispers. From the smallest child to the oldest shepherd in the mountains, everyone spoke of the same thing, the fire that came from the sky. Some said it was lightning, others said it was a storm. But the ones who saw it with their own eyes knew better. They said it was God's fire, and it came for the man who had dared to crucify his people. In Maaloula, smoke still rose from the place where General Karim had stood. His soldiers were gone, scattered like dry leaves in the wind. Some hid in caves, some ran to the borders, and others dropped their weapons forever. No one wanted to fight anymore. The 7 Christians, still alive though wounded, were carefully taken down from their crosses by villagers who could not believe what they had seen. Their ropes had burned off, but their clothes had not. The fire had spared them completely. It was a miracle so great that even the hardest hearts trembled. That day, the town square became silent. You could hear the sound of weeping, not from sorrow, but from awe. The people began to realize something powerful. The God of these Christians was not weak. He was watching. He was real. Far away in the capital, news of Karim's death reached the military command. Officers who once praised him now whispered his name in fear. How could a man burn like that without fire touching anyone else? One of them asked, "It's superstition," another said, but his hands shook as he spoke. Superstition. The first officer snapped. The whole battalion saw it happen. Even the sky changed color. The room fell silent. No one wanted to speak further. They all knew Karim's cruelty, and now they knew his end. That night, a strange wind swept through the military compound. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut on their own, and the soldiers couldn't sleep. Some claimed they saw a glow outside, like fire moving through the air. Others said they heard a voice whispering, "Touch not my chosen." Back in Maaloula, the people gathered at the small church, the oldest in the city, built from stone and faith. The 7 Christians sat quietly at the front, their faces glowing softly in the candlelight. The priest, Father Elias, stood before the crowd. His voice trembled as he spoke. "My children," he said, "we have witnessed something that even prophets long to see. God has shown his hand. He has defended his people not with swords, but with fire from heaven." The people cried. Some fell to their knees, praying for forgiveness. Others ran home to tear down idols, to throw away the weapons they had used in hate. But among the crowd was a man named Tariq, one of Karim's former soldiers. He had been there during the crucifixions. He had seen everything. His heart was broken, his spirit heavy. He stood up and said, "I saw the fire. I heard the voice. I ran like a coward. But now I know, there is no power greater than the God of these people." Tears filled his eyes as he knelt before the 7 Christians. "Forgive me," he whispered. The oldest of the 7, a woman named Miriam, reached out and touched his head gently. "You are forgiven," she said softly. "Because the one we serve forgave even those who nailed him to the cross." Her words spread through the crowd like sunlight breaking through a storm. People wept openly. Hope began to bloom where fear once lived. But while peace was filling Maaloula, far beyond the hills, darkness was rising again. Some of Karim's commanders, men even more ruthless than he, heard of his death and became angry. They said, "We will not be ruled by this Christian God." They began planning revenge, gathering weapons, calling on allies. Their hearts grew darker, filled with rage and pride. They wanted to prove that no fire could stop them. And once again, the earth would shake. Because heaven was not done speaking. The night was heavy with silence. Far from Maaloula, in a secret military camp hidden between the Syrian hills, angry voices filled the darkness. Torches burned low, and shadows danced on the rocky walls. At the center stood Colonel Rashid, Karim's closest ally. He was known for his cruelty, but also his pride. When he heard that Karim had been burned by what witnesses called the fire of God, Rashid laughed bitterly. "Fire from heaven," he scoffed. "No fire can touch a man without reason. It was an accident, or perhaps lightning. Do you think God himself fights for these weak Christians?" Some soldiers agreed, trembling. Others said nothing. Fear tied their tongues. Rashid slammed his fist on the wooden table. "Tomorrow," he roared, "we march to Maaloula. We will finish what Karim started. And if their God dares to stop us again, let him try." The men shouted, "Yes, sir." But deep inside, their hearts were not with him. That night, Rashid could not sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind echoing with Karim's last screams. He dreamed of fire, of a voice calling his name. "Rashid," it whispered. He sat up, sweating. "Who's there?" The tent was empty. The fire outside flickered strangely. The air grew colder. He tried to sleep again, but the same dream came, this time clearer. He saw Karim, standing in the middle of flames, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Turn back, Rashid," the burning figure said. "Do not fight against the one who cannot be defeated." Rashid woke with a start, shaking. He drank water, trying to calm himself. "Just a dream," he muttered. "Just fear." But outside his tent, the guards swore they saw fire move through the camp, a soft, glowing light that circled the tents and vanished into the wind. By sunrise, Rashid's army of nearly 200 soldiers began their march toward Maaloula. The sky was strangely gray. No birds sang. Even the desert winds were quiet, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. When they reached the edge of the town, villagers ran to hide. Mothers clutched their children. The 7 Christians, still weak from their wounds, gathered at the church and began to pray. "Lord," Miriam whispered, her voice steady, "you defended us once. Do it again, not for us, but so the world may know you are real." Her prayer was soft, but heaven heard it. As Rashid and his men approached, they saw the blackened ground where Karim had died. The soldiers slowed down, whispering among themselves. The place still smelled faintly of smoke, even after days. Rashid raised his hand. "Stop staring at ashes," he barked. "Set fire to the village." But as soon as he gave the order, a strange wind began to blow, not hot, not cold, just powerful. It moved through the valley like a living thing. The torches flickered and went out. "Light them again," Rashid shouted. But when they tried, the fire refused to burn. The sky darkened suddenly, clouds rolling in from nowhere. Thunder rumbled. Deep, long, and angry. The soldiers looked around nervously. Then came the first flash of lightning, blinding and white. It struck the hill beside them, shaking the ground. "Retreat," one soldier cried, but Rashid refused. "Cowards," he screamed. "Keep moving. There's no God here." Before he could take another step, another bolt of lightning struck, this time, right in front of him. The explosion threw him to the ground. When he looked up, the fire was not normal, it was gold. It swirled like a storm, glowing brighter and brighter. And then, from within the fire, came a voice, not loud, but so powerful that it shook the air. "You were warned. You saw my mercy, yet you choose rebellion." The soldiers fell on their faces. Some screamed, some prayed, others ran into the hills, leaving their weapons behind. Rashid tried to rise, trembling. "Show yourself," he shouted into the light. "If you are God, show yourself." The fire grew taller, until it towered over him. "I am," the voice said simply. And in that moment, the fire burst forward, but it did not touch the innocent. It wrapped around Rashid, just as it had done to Karim. His screams echoed through the valley, then faded into silence. When the fire vanished, the sky cleared. The wind stopped, and where Rashid had stood, only ashes remained. That day, the soldiers who survived dropped their weapons forever. Many ran to the church in Maaloula, falling to their knees before the 7 Christians. "We saw it," they cried. "We saw the fire, and we heard the voice." Father Elias lifted his hands. "Then you know," he said, "that there is no greater power than the God who lives." The soldiers wept. Many of them gave their lives to Christ that day. But heaven was not done. Beyond Maaloula, word of the fire spread to cities and nations. Kings, generals, and rulers began to whisper, "Who is this God that defends his people with fire?" News of what happened in Maaloula spread like wildfire across Syria. Every city, every village, every soldier knew the story, how fire came down from heaven twice, and both times it burned only the wicked. But now, the story was no longer just about Karim or Rashid. It had become something greater, a sign that no one could deny. In the capital city of Damascus, government officials argued all night. The president's advisors spoke in hushed tones, afraid to even mention God's name aloud. One said, "If the people believe this was divine punishment, we will lose control." Another whispered, "Then perhaps we should destroy the church and silence those who speak of it." But an older officer shook his head slowly. "You cannot silence heaven," he said. "You can shoot men, but you cannot shoot fire from God." The room went quiet. For the first time, powerful men felt powerless. Meanwhile, Maaloula had changed completely. The town that once trembled with fear now pulsed with faith. The 7 believers, Miriam and the others, were no longer seen as victims, but as living miracles. People from faraway lands came to see them, to touch their hands, to hear their story. Father Elias would stand before the crowd each morning, his eyes shining. "You see," he said, "God still lives. He still answers. He still protects his children." Even the Muslims from nearby towns began to visit secretly, curious about this God who spoke through fire. Some came in disguise, pretending to trade goods, but their hearts were seeking truth. One night, a man named Yusuf, a respected teacher from Aleppo, came quietly to see Miriam. He bowed his head and said, "I have taught about many prophets, but never have I seen power like this. Tell me, who is this Jesus you serve?" Miriam smiled kindly. "He is the Son of the living God," she said. "He died for all, even for those who hate him. And when people persecute his children, he still reaches out with mercy before justice." Yusuf listened, tears forming in his eyes. "Then I want to know him," he whispered. That night, Yusuf gave his life to Christ, and it marked the beginning of something no one expected. Within weeks, hundreds came to faith. Entire families gathered in the open fields to pray, not in fear but in freedom. The same soldiers who had once carried swords now carried Bibles. The same mouths that once cursed began to praise. But heaven's miracles did not stop there. One morning, as the town gathered for worship, a bright light filled the small church. It was not the sun, it came from within. The walls glowed softly, and a warm wind blew through the open door. People gasped, some fell on their knees. Children pointed upward, their faces glowing. And then, as witnesses later swore, the shadow of a man appeared in the light. It was shaped like a figure in white, with arms outstretched, as if blessing them. No one could move. The air was thick with peace. A voice, gentle and calm, filled the room. "I have seen your faith," it said. "Do not fear what men can do. For I am with you always, even to the end." The light slowly faded, but its warmth remained. In their hearts, in the walls, in the very air they breathed. Father Elias wept openly. "He came," he whispered. "Jesus came to us." That day, people ran through the streets shouting, "God has visited Syria." Far away, the nations began to talk. Journalists, skeptics, and leaders tried to explain it. Some said it was magic, others said it was lies, but when they came to investigate, they too saw what no one could deny. The scorched ground where Karim and Rashid had died still burned faintly at night, not with red fire, but with a golden light that shimmered like stars. No matter how much it rained, the light never went out. Scientists took samples. They could not explain it. Soldiers tried to guard it. But those who came too close said they heard a voice whisper, "This is holy ground." Soon, the whole nation trembled, not in fear of war, but in awe of what God had done. Families reunited. Enemies forgave each other. People prayed openly in streets and homes. The persecution that once divided them began to fade, replaced by something greater, hope. But in the unseen world, darkness was furious. Evil could not stand the fire of truth. And as light spread across Syria, the enemy began to plot again, quietly, waiting for a chance to strike back. The next chapter of the story would not just test their faith, it would reveal who truly believed. Summary: after God's fire destroyed the wicked soldiers, the story of Maaloula spread across Syria. The whole country trembled as people realized that heaven itself had defended the Christians. Powerful leaders in Damascus were afraid, unable to explain what had happened. In Maaloula, faith grew stronger. The 7 survivors became living witnesses of God's power, and many people, even Muslims, came to see them and learn about Jesus. A man named Yusuf, once a respected teacher, accepted Christ after hearing Miriam's words of love and forgiveness. Soon, hundreds began to believe. During worship, a bright light filled the church, and a gentle voice, believed to be Jesus, told them not to fear, for he was with them. The ground where Karim and Rashid had died continued to glow with holy light that never faded, even when scientists tried to explain it. The nation changed. Fear turned to faith, hate turned to hope, and enemies became brothers. But as light filled Syria, darkness began to stir again, planning its final move against God's people. Moral lesson: when darkness rises, God's light shines brighter. No power on earth can destroy those who stand in faith. Even in the fire, God is present, turning fear into faith and pain into victory. The end.